There we go. Okay, welcome everyone to the webinar tonight on family reunification, family sponsorship, and super visas. We are here from Don Valley Community Legal Services. My name is Laura Nonan, and I am the Community Development Worker. I have a few of my colleagues here with us. I'm going to pass it over to Allison, who's the head of our immigration law team, just for a quick intro.
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Allison Krochak. I'm a staff lawyer at Don Valley Community Legal Services on the immigration team and also immigration team lead, which means I handle a lot of the administrative aspects as well as being a lawyer. I'm going to pass it off to Jennifer to introduce herself. She's one of the presenters for today's session, and we are just waiting for Zach, our other presenter, to join us. But in the meantime, Jen, take it away.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Wan. I'm an immigration lawyer at Don Valley Community Legal Services. I also serve clients in Scarborough catchment area through the TEALS program. Um, Laura, did you want to go through the introduction slides
Yeah,
first?
I just wanted to make sure everyone knew who the floating heads on Zoom were first.
Okay, yes. Also, joining us a bit later will be Zachary Morgenstern. He texted me that there's something wrong with his sound, and so he had to restart his computer and will join us after.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Okay, so I am going to be here as a support person and running the slides for my colleagues, and I'm going to go over a few introduction slides about our legal clinic. And we'll also begin with a land acknowledgement. So our legal clinic is located near the Don River flowing into Lake Ontario, and we acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We would also like to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are committed to decolonization and reconciliation, and we're grateful to have this opportunity to be present, to listen, and to allow each of us to talk about legal issues and how they affect our life and healing. And we have Zach with us now. Could we do a quick tech check, Zach? Can you hear us and can we hear you?
Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes. Okay, we're great. Okay. So we're just going to go through some quick intro slides. So who are we? I'm not sure if everyone on the Zoom is familiar with our legal clinic. Again, we're Don Valley Community Legal Services. We are a community legal clinic funded by Legal Aid Ontario. Our services are free. You might remember East Toronto or Flemington Community Legal Services. Both of those clinics amalgamated in 2019, and now we are Don Valley. And we have lawyers, paralegals, law students, admin staff, and myself, community development worker on our team. We provide public legal education workshops like this one tonight. We do a lot of outreach in the communities we serve. We participate in law reform and advocacy, along with serving our clients. We have four areas of law that we do. We do housing law for tenants, we do employment law, we do immigration law, and we do income supports. So that's Ontario Disability Support Program, Ontario Works, Canada Pension Plan, Old Age Security, those types of income supports. If we do not do other areas of law, but if you do need help with that, you can call us and we can always refer you to somewhere else or a different agency. And this is our catchment area. So if you live in these boundaries, we have Victoria Park Avenue on the east and then down to Lake Ontario, and then it zigzags up the Don River and Yonge Street all the way up to York Mills in the 401. So it's a very large catchment area. If you are outside of this, I'll have some information on who else you can call. We are here to serve clients within our catchment only, but there is a legal clinic in every part of Toronto and Ontario. Right now, we are in between offices. So we have our satellite office down at the Ralph Thornton Community Center, which is where the Star is, and it's Queen and Broadview Avenue. We left our office at 1 Leaside Park Drive in the summer, and we're waiting to move into the new Thorncliffe Park Community Hub, which is going to be inside the East York Town Center. So for the folks who are in Thorncliffe or Flemington or East York, you're probably very familiar with that. This might be new information for other people on the Zoom, but we will be sure to announce when we're up and running at the new Thorncliffe Park Hub. and then how to contact us. So please call us. Do not walk in, do not show up at our satellite office. We want to make sure someone's available to speak with you, and our team's very busy. So please call. You'll go through our intake process first. And I just want to note, because of the high volume of calls we receive, you will not get a live person right away. You're going to have to leave a message, and someone from our intake team will call you back within 24 business hours. So that could mean 3 business days, typically sooner. Usually it's a day. It just depends on how many calls we have. We also have an intake form on our website, and then there's some information there about when our intake is open. This is all again on our website if you can't absorb it all tonight. And then, oh yeah, just the areas of law we do and don't do. And again, if it's an area of law we don't do, we'll probably be able to refer you to a different clinic, pro bono lawyers, or different agencies that can help you. We also provide document services. I won't go into all the details here. This is on our website again, but if you have a question or want to make an appointment, give us a call. That's our intake line, extension 1. And then, yes, so who we can help. If you're outside of our catchment and you do call us, we will refer you to the legal clinic in your area. And then I just wanted, this is, yes, find your local legal clinic. So legalaid.on.ca/legal clinics. If you put in your address or your postal code, you'll find your own community legal clinic. So very important information. And all of these services are free. We're all funded by Legal Aid Ontario. And just a quick zero tolerance policy for any abusive staff or abusive behavior towards our staff. We just want to make this, as the statement clear to folks, not that we expect any of you to be abusive towards us, but we just put it out there for folks to know. I know it can be frustrating to leave a message and wait a day to hear back, but there are growing needs in the communities we serve. So we do have some policies in place just to make sure we're able to help everyone. And on our website, again, please check us out, donvalleylegal.ca. We have some great resources, and all this information is available online. And I know this is very quick, and I'm just going to, oops, were there any questions in the chat? I'm just trying to look. Okay, no, we're good. Can we, oh yes, the webinar will be posted online after, folks. And then this is a disclaimer for tonight. This is not legal advice. This is general information provided by our lawyers. Laws and policies can change quickly. Every situation is different. We're not going to be able to answer your specific legal questions tonight about your specific individual cases, but please call us if you do need assistance. When in doubt, seek legal advice. While our clinic does not ordinarily represent on citizenship applications, we can provide free legal advice to those who live in our catchment area and offer brief services to those who meet our financial eligibility guidelines. It's an important point. Anyone in our catchment can call us and get free summary legal advice, get some questions answered. If you do need representation, you have to be low income, and that's something you'll discuss with our intake team and your caseworker. And I think my slides are about done. Yes, so I'm going to pass it over to Jen now, who will start the topic.
In this webinar, we're going to cover the basics of 6 types of applications. The first 2 are specifically for refugees to bring their immediate family to Canada. This is the 1-year window application and the protected person permanent residence application. So the 1-year window is for those whose refugee determinations were granted outside of Canada. They're accepted for resettlement by the Canadian government, or they're privately sponsored refugees. The protected person permanent residence application is for successful refugee claimants inside of Canada or successful applicants for a pre-removal risk assessment. The second 2 types of applications that we'll cover are family sponsorship applications. These are for all permanent residents and Canadian citizens, however they obtain their status. So the first group is the family class sponsorship applications for overseas family members. And the second is the spouse or common law partner in Canada class, which is limited to the spouse and common law partner in Canada and can include accompanying dependent children inside or outside of Canada. The third 2 applications, which will be covered by Zach, are specifically for parents and grandparents. The grandparent sponsorship application, which is permanent residence application, and parent-grandparent super visas, which are temporary residence applications. In this presentation, I might refer to IRCC a lot, which stands for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. This is the agency of the Canadian government that is devoted to immigration. Okay, so let's start with some topics that are common themes in many applications. Okay, the focus of Canadian immigration is to bring one's immediate family to Canada. So that includes one's spouse or common law partner, dependent children, especially under age 22. A dependent child could also be someone who is over the age of 22, but they're still financially dependent on their parent due to a mental or physical health condition. So that needs to be demonstrated. Dependent children of the spouse or partner are also included. Already legally adopted children, and also children of accepted dependent children. So, for example, if a child is unmarried under the age of 22 but has a child out of wedlock, that child could be included. So, dependent children cannot be married or in a common law partnership. When they marry or they've lived with a romantic partner for 1 year, that cuts them off from being considered a dependent. Okay. So another topic is for children who are applying for permanent residence to Canada without the other parent. IRCC requires that. So I probably skipped some. We're on a different.
I'm sorry, Jen, which slide are you on?
Next, let's see the next slide, maybe. Yes. Okay. So for children who are coming to Canada permanently without the other parent, IRCC requires notarized consent from the other parent with a copy of their valid passport or government issued ID, or a court order for sole custody and permission to relocate the child to Canada. The reasons for this requirement is that Canada has obligations under the Hague Convention against International Child Abduction. Granting Canadian permanent residence, the child may cut off the other parent forever because they might not be allowed to visit Canada. So they have to consider the other parent's rights regarding the child, including custody and access to the child. So this requirement, it might be possible to seek an exemption from this requirement under special circumstances. And if that is something that you need an exemption because it's not possible to get the other parent to agree, or there's a high stress circumstance, maybe there was domestic violence, you might seek an exemption, but it's recommended that you seek legal advice. Okay. Another common theme to a lot of these applications is that there's a requirement that in your permanent residence application, you have to have declared all your family members. And it's most importantly to include your spouse, your common law partner, and all your children, and also your parents and siblings. So there's a required form for this, the additional family information form for this purpose. So it's extremely important to do this because if anything changes in the composition of your family before you're granted permanent residence, you're required to update IRCC about these changes before you travel to Canada and before you are granted permanent residence. This is best done in writing by uploading a letter to the IRCC web form to the specific visa office that's handling the application, or in some visa offices accept email. If you don't list everyone, the rules technically bar you from forever bringing them to Canada, either on a one-year window application or in a family sponsorship application. There is for sponsorship, some sponsorship applicants, there is a public policy in place that's in effect until September of 2026 to soften the blow of this really harsh rule. So like some applicants, they wrongly assume that once their application is almost complete, they can just quickly get married so they can eventually bring their spouse to Canada. This is a really bad idea because if they've applied as someone's dependent child, that marriage will cut them off from consideration as a dependent child. They may no longer be eligible under the permanent residence application under which they applied. And also, if they neglect to tell IRCC about their new spouse, or if they had a child, if they've neglected to tell them before coming to Canada and they try to sponsor them later, IRCC will refuse that application unless they grant them an exemption. Okay, so let's turn to family reunification applications for refugees.
Is this the correct slide, Jen?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. The one-year window program is for those who were determined to be refugees overseas and they were resettled as permanent residents of Canada, either directly by the Canadian government or through a private refugee sponsorship. We can go on. So this program is limited to immediate family members of the refugee who were previously declared during the refugee's own permanent residence process before they traveled to Canada. So they've already been declared, and they should be listed on the refugee's confirmation of permanent residence document. If not, and if it can't be shown that they were declared to IRCC during the process, it would be a waste of time to make the one-year window request for them because they're pretty strict about these rules. So normally, de facto family members, people who don't fit the category of an immediate family member, such as an informally adopted child, an overage adult child, or a financially dependent disabled adult sibling, they cannot ordinarily be included on the one-year window application. And if you have, a de facto family member who has been part of your family forever, you should seek legal advice about the options. Okay, so. Oh, so yeah, sorry, that was the slide that I just. Okay. Okay, so the basics I'm just gonna quickly go over basics that are on the next several slides. So the basics are that the filing deadline is 1 year after PR is granted, and that date is listed on the back side of the PR card. There is no filing fee for this application. This application is made online through the permanent residence portal. You can request a different method by emailing the responsible office. IRCC, there's no filing fee. IRCC also covers the cost of the medical exam. They don't charge for biometrics, and they provide immigration loans for airfare for the family. Family members of government-assisted refugees who are coming on the one-year window program, they may be eligible for resettlement assistance program support for 12 months. Applicants are expected to get their own passport. If the applicants are outside their home country, the visa office can issue a single journey travel document by which to travel to Canada. Asking for this can considerably delay the process. The current average processing time for this application is 52 weeks, which is really long. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the protected person permanent residence application. This program is for, again, for successful refugee claimants inside of Canada and those who are successful applicants for the pre-removal risk assessment. So with this application, the refugee is applying for their own permanent residence, and they're requesting processing of their immediate family members, both in Canada and overseas, as accompanying family members. It's a two-step process. First, IRCC will process the refugee and family members in Canada. That process can take, the current average processing time for that is 25 months. Then they'll refer the application for the overseas family members to the assigned visa office, and the full processing time is the same as the 1-year window, which is 52 months. Okay, so this application is like the 1-year window in that it's limited to immediate family members, spouse or common law partner, dependent children, and children of dependent children. Okay. So then quickly to go over the basics. Again, yeah, so this is this can't be stressed enough. In this application, you have to list all your family members, especially your spouse or common law partner, all children born to you or children you've fathered, all adopted children. And it's a very harsh consequence if you fail to list them. You may be prevented from sponsoring them in the future. Okay, and just to add, I guess on the slide there is if a family member's whereabouts are unknown at the time that you make this application, you have 1 year from the date that you were granted permanent residence to request processing of that family member, but you have to have declared them. Okay, so then just the basics of the application. Oh yeah, so yeah, again, de facto family members are not ordinarily allowed, just like the 1-year window. There might be, like, under really compelling circumstances, it might make sense. It's like, especially if it's a child who's been with the family forever, it might make sense to include them try to include them on the application. The harsh consequences that it could just be, these they take so long to process, and it could just end in a refusal, which is really painful. There are some other options that we'll discuss. Okay, so just some basics about this protected person permanent residence application. There's no real filing deadline. The children's age, you can include children normally under age 22, but their ages are locked in from the date that the refugee claim was received. You can apply for this as soon as you've received a positive notice of decision. The filing is done in paper or online via the permanent residence portal. So unlike the 1-year window application, the process is not free. The standard permanent residence fees apply, $630 per adult, $175 per child, $85 biometrics for an individual, and $170 per family. Applicants have to cover the costs of the immigration medical examination. While there are immigration loans available, it's not an ordinary part of the process, but you can request it. Family members once they come to Canada, should be able to access social assistance and disability support just as other permanent residents in Canada. Okay, so the processing time, again, it's averaged 25 months for the refugee in Canada and the family members in Canada. And for the overseas family members, it's 52 months, which is the same as for the 1-year window. Okay, so let's turn to the topic of family sponsorship applications. Okay, so as mentioned, there are 2 programs, the family class sponsorships and the spouse and common law partner in Canada applications. Many of the requirements are the same. Okay, so who is eligible to sponsor? An eligible sponsor, you have to be a Canadian permanent resident or a Canadian citizen, and you have to plan to live in Canada once the application is processed. You have to be 18 years or over. So throughout the application, from the date you file to the date that your family member gets permanent residence, as sponsor, you cannot receive social assistance for reasons other than disability. So for like if you are in receipt of Ontario ODSP, Ontario Disability Support Program funds, you're usually still eligible. For Ontario Works, that's considered like if you might be on disability, you might be receiving Ontario Works because you have a disability. You have to make that clear. But okay, so also sponsor cannot be during any point in the application cannot be in default of an immigration loan. These are most commonly given to refugees for transportation to Canada. They become due 12 months after the person is landed as permanent resident. The arrears must be paid off, and then you can set up a payment plan for the balance. A sponsor also cannot be in default of a previous sponsorship undertaking during any point in the application. So if a sponsor has previously sponsored another family member, they had to make a promise to financially support that family member for a certain period of time. And if they didn't do that, and that family member had to apply for social assistance during the undertaking period, those amounts that are paid to that family member, they get charged to the sponsor. Okay, and so you also cannot, as a sponsor, you can't have an undischarged bankruptcy. And you also can't have criminal convictions for violent offenses, offenses against relatives, or sexual offenses. Okay, so now we'll turn to family members who can be sponsored in a family class sponsorship. So there are different kind of categories with different rules. So the most common application is for immediate family members, the spouse, the common law partner, and dependent children. Under family sponsorship, it's also permitted to sponsor a conjugal partner who hasn't lived with the sponsor for 1 year, and which would qualify them as a common law partner. So if it's possible to marry or live together for 1 year before filing, it's much better to do that because IRCC wants to, limit this category to help couples in instances where they can't marry, like LGBTQ in certain individuals in certain countries. Okay, so other possibilities for family sponsorship, other categories for family sponsorship, family class sponsorship are children you intend to adopt. This is a very complicated process that we don't cover. Orphan siblings, orphan nieces and nephews, or orphan grandchildren. Parent-grandparent sponsorship, which is going to be covered by Zach. And then also other relatives where the Canadian permanent resident or citizen is all by themselves here in Canada, and they don't have a living spouse, partner, child, or parent or grandparent to sponsor. And we kind of refer to that as the lone Canadian application. So again, there's a prior declaration requirement. So if these family members that you're trying to sponsor, they existed during the sponsor's permanent residence process, the immigration rules require that the sponsor had to have declared them during their own permanent residence process, and that the family members were examined. That means that they had their biometrics taken, they had their medical examination, and they did the background checks. And there's an exception, like sometimes the officer deems that that's not really necessary. They don't ask for that. And so that's okay. Um, so if they were not previously declared, they are, by the rules, they are excluded from the family class and can't be sponsored unless they're granted an exemption. Okay. Okay, so as I mentioned, there is a public policy exemption in effect to soften the blow of this harsh rule. If you need this exemption, it's important to request it in writing up front and not rely on IRCC to just grant it because they won't. Um, this public policy exemption is available for spouses, common law partners, conjugal partners, and dependent children of refugees and the like, similarly situated to refugees, and also those who got permanent residence through a family sponsorship. Those immediate family members. It's not available where declaring or examining the family member would have made the sponsor ineligible for the program by which they obtain permanent residence. This public policy exemption is available until September 10th, 2026. It's been extended from year to year since 2019. However, with a change in government, it's really not assured that it will always exist. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was we did that one. Okay, so another is a feature that's common to all sponsorships is this undertaking requirement. The sponsor must sign an undertaking, which is an enforceable promise to support their family member financially in their basic needs. The length of the undertaking, it varies per family member sponsored. So it's 3 years for spouse or partner. It's 10 years or up to age 25, the earlier of those dates, for a child who got permanent residence under age 22. It's 3 years for a child who is age 22 and up. It's 20 years for parents or grandparents because it's understood that they would have a harder time supporting themselves. And it's 10 years for other relatives. As I mentioned, if the family member goes on social assistance or disability during the undertaking period, the amount gets charged to the sponsor. The sponsor may not be aware of it. And the amounts can accumulate to tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they might not ever receive notice of it until they try to sponsor someone. This undertaking cannot be modified or canceled. So even if the sponsor divorces his wife, the sponsored spouse or wife, or was abandoned by that family member, they're still held to this undertaking. The government can seek to collect against a sponsor in default, but more often it comes up when someone tries to sponsor again a second time because then they're ineligible. So then they would have to, in order to sponsor again, they would have to enter into a payment plan to pay off the sponsorship debt. And because they were technically ineligible to sponsor, even though they didn't know it, they have to request an exemption, which may or may not be granted. Okay. So there are income requirements depending on the category. So for immediate family members, spouse, partner, dependent children, there is no income requirement to sponsor these family members. For other categories, the sponsor needs to demonstrate that their income is high enough that they can afford to support the family members that they're applying to bring. So those amounts are listed in a table published each year, referred to as minimum necessary income. So I think on the next slide, I have that table.
I just see a hand up. I'm not sure if
Oh,
you want
okay.
to take the question. Um, is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, I see Noor has a hand up. I'm gonna let you. Oh, the hand has gone down.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's up again. Okay,
Oh,
I'll
just
let allowed to talk, and for everyone else, there is a Q&A feature. If you can put your questions in and we'll answer them at the end. Okay, Noor, asked to unmute. Are you able to speak?
Hello.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, hi. Sorry for I'm coming late. So like I'm coming late.
Oh,
Oh,
no worries.
did you have a question?
Still I don't know about this one, so that's why I just for now I listen. Then after then I will skip.
Oh, okay, okay.
The video is going to be posted,
Okay.
the video of the presentation, so you can watch it from the beginning if you want later.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Noor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's see here.
Okay.
Okay, so on the next slide, I think there's a table for the minimum necessary income. This is for the current year. It's actually for, what you made last year. So the way that this works is you have to add up the number of family members in your existing household and add that to the number of family members you're seeking to sponsor. And then it tells you how much you need to have made in the last tax year. So this is for this is not for parent-grandparent sponsorship. That table, the income levels are higher, like they're 30% higher, and they look at the last 3 years. But these are for the other categories, not the immediate family members, but I think, as I mentioned, those other categories that you can sponsor, like an adopted child you intend to adopt, if you're the lone Canadian, orphaned siblings, etc. Okay. Okay, so to meet these income requirements, it is possible to include one spouse or common law partner as a co-sponsor for certain applications. So not for a spousal sponsorship, because they're not yet. They have to be eligible to sponsor as well. They have to be a permanent resident or Canadian citizen. They can't be the applicant. So in a co-sponsor situation, the incomes get added, and then they have to meet that minimum necessary income. The co-sponsor must sign an undertaking and be held to the same terms as the sponsor. Okay, so just some basics. These basics, they apply both to the family class sponsorship and the other class we'll talk about, the spouse or common law partner in Canada class. Okay, so you can file as soon as you're eligible. You have to be a PR at least 18 or over, age 18 or over. You can't be on social assistance. You have to be up to date in your immigration loan payments. You can't be in default of a sponsorship debt, although you can't, it's hard to find out about that beforehand. So one consideration, though, is that children have to be under the age of 22 on the date that you file the application, unless they're disabled, unless they have a physical or mental health condition that makes them financially dependent. And the children also can't get married, can't be married. Okay, so this application is filed via the permanent residence portal. The standard permanent residence fees apply. So $630 per adult applicant, $175 per child, $85 for individual biometrics, $170 per family biometrics. There's an additional right of permanent residence fee that applies to like the spouse and common law partner, and probably some of those adult applicants, not dependent children though. And that amount is $575. It can be paid up front. Also, it's due close to the end of the process. They'll make a request for it. The applicant will cover the costs of the immigration medical examination. They'll cover their own airfare. And if they can't afford it, they request an immigration loan. That raises concerns of financial inadmissibility, because sponsors trying to show that they can afford to support them because they have to sign the undertaking. And the sponsor has to be responsible for the family members' living costs. So the processing time for family class sponsorships, if it's a spouse or partner, it's an average of 10 months currently. And for a child, it varies per country. So the quicker processing times of the sponsorship versus those refugee reunification applications, those family reunification applications, it raises a question whether it might be better just to sponsor because it's so much faster. Okay, so the spouse or common law partner in Canada class that, oh, sorry. Yeah, we can skip that one. It's just how to apply some links. So just a few notes on this. It's very similar to family class sponsorship. It's only for spouses and common law partners who are already in Canada, or who can come, maybe they can come on a visitor visa and then they'll be in Canada and you can make this application. And you can include accompanying dependent children, whether in Canada or overseas. If you're making applications or sponsorship applications for children alone without their parent, then you have to go through the family class process. Okay, so for the spouse or common law partner in Canada class, the applicant does not need to have legal immigration status in Canada per public policy. However, other grounds of inadmissibility won't be overlooked. In this application, there is an option if for someone who does have legal immigration status in Canada and maintains that throughout the application, they're eligible for a work permit during this application, and it's not quick, so just to keep that in mind. I think it's when it's sort of approved in principle. For this class, the applicant is required to stay in Canada while they await their grant of permanent residence. If they leave Canada, then the application will be refused. It's not possible to transfer to the overseas process. I think they're pretty rigid about these categories. They recommend that in a case, if someone needs to leave Canada, someone who's made this application needs to leave Canada during the process, it's recommended that they withdraw the application and then refile in the family class process. But they will lose their priority, their place in line. Okay, so the average so all the eligibility requirements, the filing method, the fees, the terms are the same as for family class sponsorships. The processing time, it's an average of 12 months for spouse or common law partner, and probably like children in Canada as well, I imagine. And then for children who are overseas, it varies per country. Okay, so I guess we can go to the next slide. I tried to make a flow chart of these applications. I'm sorry if it's more confusing than helpful. So if you read it this will be made available. I'll try to fix it because I think there's a mistake in it. So if you go down the 1 year window application, it just tries to list all the stages. So before you make that 1 year window application, you have to have had it be considered a refugee overseas. You apply to Canada for resettlement, and during that application, you have to include all your family members. And then when you're landed in Canada as a permanent resident, that 1 year window begins. And can you go to the next slide, please? So then you submit your 1 year window application through the permanent residence portal. The application is initially reviewed by the Resettlement Operations Center in Ottawa for eligibility, basic eligibility. And then it gets referred to the Overseas Visa Office. Um, they assess the family relationship. Um, they issue instructions for medical examination and biometrics. They conduct the criminality and security assessment. They may request the visa office may request updated forms, additional documents, and issue procedural fairness letters. And they give you time to respond to those letters. And then they may require an interview of the applicant. So if approved, then they issue a passport collection letter and they issue the visas. And before that family member, the new family member who's applying, they need to declare all their family members before traveling to Canada. When they arrive in Canada, they'll have a landing interview with the Canada Border Services Agency, and they have to confirm all their immediate family members who are listed on the confirmation of permanent residence, and they have to sign that. And that will determine basically whether they can sponsor those members in those family members in the future. So I've kind of done this, tried to do the same for the other categories. If you want to just go up again, protected person. So it's kind of a similar process. They first have to they have to conduct the assessments for the refugee and family members in Canada. They grant them permanent residence, and then they refer to the overseas visa office. And can we go to the second slide again? I'm so sorry. And then it gets referred for the same type of assessment. That's an eligible family relationship. They do medicals, biometrics, and they may ask for procedural fairness. They may issue procedural fairness letters. So it's kind of the same. And then the family sponsorship is kind of a similar process as well. So there's one last slide. Just to note about procedural fairness letters. I think there are two more slides, sorry. So the visa office, or here in Canada, they may issue a procedural fairness if they suspect that a requirement is not met. They will provide an opportunity to respond in writing. Usually they give 30 days. So common procedural fairness issues are whether the relationship is genuine or whether it's for immigration purposes. So they may suspect this when the sponsor and applicant don't really seem to know each other, if they give inconsistent answers, or if they provided very little evidence of their relationship. Another common procedural fairness issue is whether the family member is eligible according to the rules. So for example, like a dependent child, if they are married or something like that, they might challenge that. Whether the family member is admissible to Canada on various grounds. So whether there was a misrepresentation, and this is very serious because it carries a 5-year bar to applying for permanent residence. So if someone provided false or misleading information, or they omitted information when they were required to give it. Criminal inadmissibility. Okay. Sorry, I just saw the chat. Criminal inadmissibility. So if someone's committed a criminal act outside of Canada, that would be considered what is an indictable offense in Canada, or conviction of 2 separate offenses in another country that would be considered offenses in Canada, then they could be found criminally inadmissible to Canada, and their applications could be refused. And then medical inadmissibility, which is if someone has a health condition that poses a danger to public health or safety, or is anticipated to pose an excessive demand on Canada's health and social services. So that then it could be refused on that basis. So for example, if somebody has there's actually a dollar amount. So If it cost if its anticipated treatment is anticipated cost 131,000 and $100 over 5 years, which is about 26,220 per year, then that would cause a problem in the application. So that, like, for example, like kidney failure, chronic kidney disease, that's extremely expensive to treat. I mean, it's whenever you have like a procedural fairness letter, it is a good idea to seek legal advice, because there might be a way to overcome it. So you have 30 days, you have a limited time to respond. If they're satisfied with your response, then the processing continues, and if not, the application is refused. And I think the last slide is just brief about if it's refused. So as soon as you get a refusal, seek legal advice. You can call our clinic. Some options, just quick options: a request for reconsideration. This is at the officer's discretion. For the 1 year window, protected person permanent residence applications and sponsorships outside of the family class. Also for the spouse and common law partner in Canada class. Your recourse is in federal court through an application for leave and for judicial review. You have 15 days. If the application was decided by an office in Canada, you have 15 days to file your notice. If the decision was made by an overseas visa office, you have 60 days. For family class sponsorships, you would file a notice of appeal in the Immigration Appeal Division, and you have 30 days for decision. Sorry, I said by office in Canada, but that's not actually true. Just 30 days. You have 30 days to file. It's usually made by overseas visa office. I mean, depending where it would be made by an overseas visa office. Okay, I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Jen. I'm just gonna check if no open questions. It looks like Allison, thank you for taking care of some of those questions.
Yeah, I've been answering the questions, but we can also go over them at the end too,
Yeah.
just to clarify anything.
Thank you. Was I way over for time? I'm actually not.
You're okay. We're at 7:27. So we'll go over to Zach now. And then I don't know how long Zach will be, but we'll try to get to the questions at the end.
Yep.
And
So
you can tell me next slide if you need to. I'm sorry, I might have.
yeah, no problem. Yep. So by popular demand, I am presenting on the topic of parent and grandparent sponsorship. People keep asking about this, and we have to keep saying it's basically not an option anymore. This is a program that is broken, as you will see, into two steps. The first is you have to express interest in applying. Thanks, Laura, very intuitive. And the second step is actually applying. And what we've seen every year since 2020 is that they haven't allowed new people to do that first step. So while there are new people, you might hear about new people applying because there are people already in the system who are occasionally allowed to do the second step. The first step is not an option at the moment and may not be for a long time because right now the immigration minister has a specific intent of lowering immigration levels, and that's with the liberals in power. So if the conservatives come to power, it's hard to imagine things would get better anytime soon. So this is a very theoretical presentation. So I've been an immigration lawyer since 2021. So I have never helped with one of these applications. I basically had to go on YouTube and take some screenshots of the YouTube video to show someone walking a person through this process at the time. So the image I have on the slide here is what it looks like when you do that first step, which is called expressing interest. And you fill out a short form saying, I want to sponsor my parent or my grandparent. Next slide. So you don't need very much information about that person. You just need to basically know who that person is, and you need to know in advance you will qualify. So you're asked some basic questions like, are you a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, or someone who counts as Indigenous under the Indian Act? Um, and yeah, then you enter your name and next slide. The details of the person you are sponsoring. You would also need to have a document ready that proves you have legal status in Canada, such as your permanent resident card, or if you're a citizen, your passport. Next slide. So yeah, you would enter the name of the person you intend to sponsor. And you should be confident about who the person is you intend to sponsor. Because this is a two-step process, at the very beginning, you are committing to sponsoring a person, or if you have the resources, a couple, or I guess in some unusual cases, a couple and their minor children. But you would have to qualify to be able to do that. And because it's a two-step process, in step one, you're just giving this little bit of information. And if you're ever invited to step two, then you would have to apply to sponsor those people you previously asked for permission to sponsor. So next slide. You also, when you do that first step of expressing interest, have to sign that what you are saying is true. This is a security method to keep people from trying to enter the system more than once. And I realize I haven't explained this so far, but the reason why it's two steps is the first step is you are telling Canada you want to have the option to sponsor, and then your name is, I mean, not literally, but figuratively put into a hat. It's a lottery. And what happens is every time Canada opens the process for parent grandparent sponsorship, they draw names, and the names that they draw are the people who are invited to step two of the process. Uh, and another important thing to note is both step one and step two, these are not things that you can just access at any time. The government will announce on their website that they're seeking new expressions of interest, which is step one, or that they're seeking new applications, which is step two. And you can only apply in that window of time when they say is available. So that's again why I had to go to a YouTube video to even find this information, because if you go to the government's website right now, there is literally no way to even do a draft application to bring your parents and grandparents over because those programs aren't open. Next slide. So this is, for example, what that warning would look like. So if you're looking to apply back in 2020, there was just a window between October 13th and November 3rd to express interest in sponsoring. So if you hear by word of mouth or you read in the news that Canada is accepting new expressions of interest, and you really want to bring over your parents, you have to look into it and figure out if it will work for you right away, because within something like 3 weeks, the opportunity will be gone. And this is something that could change every time, but the trend, as I understand it, is when Canada opens up expression of interest, when it opens up the chance for people to enter this lottery, it is for a very narrow window of time. Next slide. So again, there's a second step, which is getting the invitation to apply. So if you used a particular email address when you entered your expression of interest, make sure to never stop using that email. Monitor it closely. Check your junk mail. Occasionally, you might get an email from immigration that looks a little strange to you, and you might be tempted to think it's spam. But if it's even possibly from immigration, check, because you don't want to miss this opportunity. And just like with when the stage one, when the lottery process opens, when the actual invitations to apply come out, you have a fairly narrow amount of time to act on that invitation. So if Canada has emailed it to you, you don't want to miss that opportunity. Next slide. So the vast majority of permanent residence applications these days are done online. And we had a bit of a crisis in 2022 when we were given this message from the government that unless you get a specific disability exception, they will not accept paper applications anymore. These things explicitly have to be online. Now, do I know for sure that's enforced? No, because I've never risked testing it. But chances are, if you're doing a permanent residence application, whether it is parent, grandparent, if that ever becomes an opportunity, or one of the ones Jen was talking about, you will have to familiarize yourself with an online portal. And it would start by going to a page like the one here. You have to create an account, again, with an email and a password. Don't be surprised if you thought you had an account and it doesn't work, because there are like a million different usernames and passwords built into the immigration system. For example, you need a different username and password to log in to pay a fee than you would to log in to create an application. It's very confusing. None of it makes any sense, which is why it's always good to get help in this process. Next slide. And this is what it looks like when you start doing a permanent residence application online. So right now, if you were to go to the website where you do these applications online, you won't see what's here, because if you go under the family class, parent/grandparent will not be an option. Again, I found this in like a YouTube video of someone applying when this was an option, but this is just to illustrate what it would look like if you could do it. Next slide. So you would enter your preferred language of correspondence, and you want to be as consistent with entering names as possible. Try and enter people's names as they appear on their passports. And if there are any complications with what exactly someone's legal name is, that is something you could talk about with your lawyer. Next slide. When you do an application online, some of the forms are built into the website. So you would click on that blue button you see there that says edit, and you one by one go through the pages and enter all the information they're asking for. It'll be things like people's addresses, the addresses of their immediate family members, people's full names, their years of birth, where they were born, if they died, where they died, if they've been working, what have their jobs been over the years. There's a lot on these forms, and it wouldn't make sense to go through them all now. But a big part of applying for permanent residence online, whether it's for parents and grandparents or any other category, it's doing these online forms that are built directly into the online system. Next slide. For some reason, immigration has only built some of the online forms into its system, and other ones you have to download them as PDFs, fill them out on your computer, and then re-upload them to the website. So this can be very frustrating if you're not a tech-savvy person, or little inconsistencies just bother you. I get it. So again, this is why it's helpful to have an experienced person walking you through this. But for the parent-grandparent sponsorship, as with many other programs, there are both forms you type in directly into the website and forms you download as a PDF file and re-upload to their website. Next slide. And to make things more confusing, they don't think to provide all the forms directly as downloads. Some you have to know to look up. So again, if you have someone walking through the checklist with you, you'll be able to figure that out. But it's just one of the many inconveniences you'll find in the process of a permanent residence application. So in the case of parent and grandparent, you have to find this form IMM 5768, where you enter your financial information. Now, so far I've been telling you parent and grandparent sponsorships can feel like a pipe dream because you can only apply for them at a certain time of the year. It's a lottery, and Canada has not invited new people to enter the lottery in 4 years. But there's another reason they're very tricky. If you're sponsoring your husband, your wife, your partner, or your dependent children, no matter how much money you make, usually you will be allowed to sponsor them. The only roadblock in those cases is if Canada thinks you literally can't afford to bring those people over, that you or them will go on welfare. With parent and grandparent sponsorship, however, the rules are a bit more rigid, and you actually have to show that you have a certain amount of income with which Canada thinks you will comfortably be able to provide for them. With other kind of sponsorships, maybe you write a little letter saying, here's my plan to make some money, we'll be fine. With parent and grandparent, they're not going to be lenient. They want to see a specific number. And as a legal aid clinic, our clients generally are not going to have that number. Next slide. So yeah, this is some screenshots of what that form looks like. So starts out easy enough. You enter the name of the person you're sponsoring, but then it starts to ask you questions of, do you have other immigration financial commitments? So for example, if you just sponsored your wife a year ago, that might also be a negative factor or something you have to show you have the resources to overcome when applying to sponsor a parent or grandparent. Next slide. So yeah, so these are all the variants of that kind of question. So persons you included in a previous undertaking. So Jen talked about undertakings in her presentation. When you apply to sponsor someone for a certain amount of years, you are responsible for their financial well-being, even if you are divorced, even if you separated and you are the victim of a horrible situation. When you sponsor people to Canada, you're stuck for a certain amount of years being responsible for them, no matter how unjust that can be in some circumstances. Oh, I didn't realize I could control this. Anyway, or did you just move that, Laura? Anyway, here we are. Yep, that's good. One of the oddest things about the parent-grandparent sponsorship is they want a CV for the sponsored person, a resume. I really don't know why, because there's already a form that asks about their employment history. And generally, if you are bringing over a parent or grandparent, they're going to be retired. Often their role might be helping to take care of grandchildren. So it's a real mystery. When I did this presentation for some social workers, I included this link here for them with this well-respected lawyer who has the kind of conspiracy theory that Canada just asks for this resume as a way to get people to mess up. I hope that's not true, but it's just a little oddity of the system. The next slide. So when it comes to parent and grandparent sponsorship, they want to see that you've reached a certain income in each of the last 3 tax years. So if you've suddenly turned your circumstances around, unfortunately, that's not going to qualify you for the program. They want you to be well established by the time you're applying. And so if you have a family size of 2, you would need an income, as you see, here of 44,530, 43,082, 32,898 in the last 3 tax years. 2 people, however, means you are single. You are not responsible for someone you recently sponsored and separated from. You do not have any dependent children. It just means you are single and you are bringing over your one parent who also doesn't have any dependents. So very rarely would this first row apply to someone who is sponsoring under this program. And as you can see, the required income numbers go up very quickly if you're dealing with someone with like any kind of family structure. Next slide. So if you're feeling pretty cynical right now, thinking I went to this presentation on how to bring over parents and grandparents, and this guy basically just kept telling me the whole time it's impossible, what are your alternatives? Well, one alternative is the parent-grandparent super visa. So this is a visitor visa, so your parents are not getting permanent resident status. However, it's kind of like unofficial permanent immigration because unlike a typical visitor visa where you're only allowed to stay 6 months at a time unless you ask for an exception and get it, this one allows you to stay for up to 5 years. at a time. So parents can essentially establish themselves here permanently. The tricky thing with this one is that when you apply, you have to have bought health insurance in advance with 100,000 dollars worth of emergency medical coverage on this. So if you're making this commitment, it's with the understanding that your parents are not going to benefit from Canadian public health care. You're making the sacrifice of covering the cost of their health care and hoping that that'll be enough for Canada to allow them to be not permanent residents, but long-term visitors. For the super visa, there's also a minimum income requirement, but it's only based on the one previous year. So if the 3-year thing is what's disincentivizing you from parent grandparent, I guess it's also impossible to apply for parent grandparent right now. But yeah, another advantage of super visa, no matter what the year, is you only need 1 year of a certain income level. And it's also not quite as high as the required income for parent and grandparent. Now, the tricky thing with these super visas is when you're applying to come to Canada temporarily, generally you're being assessed by different people than those who assess you when you try to come permanently. I don't know that for sure because I don't know what happens inside visa offices. I don't literally know who the decision makers are. Oftentimes they hide behind several veils of anonymity. Um, but um, from what I've read, from listening to immigration podcasts, from seeing the bad luck clients have had, oftentimes when you apply for permanent residence, you get an officer who actually reads everything you send them, who thinks seriously about the humanitarian issues you raise, and not always, but often will use some measure of discretion if you're deserving of an exception. Visitor applications often feel like they are judged by AI. And we do know that immigration uses at least one AI program known as Chinook. Oftentimes, these decisions are not very well written. I have heard from an immigration officer that people looking at visitor visas will spend 3 to 5 minutes on a file. So if you have a parent or grandparent who's coming from a country or there are other things about them that make them unlikely to be approved for a visitor visa, that could apply to the super visa as well. Now, it's possible that there is a more sophisticated examination that goes into super visa decisions because one would think IRCC understands that this is sort of a hybrid between permanent and temporary immigration and you're bringing over more vulnerable people. But I have seen a case where this woman got everything together. She got the insurance and she applied for the super visa, but she was refused because she came to Canada as a refugee. And so immigration was convinced that her mother would make a refugee claim too, and thus they wouldn't let her get a super visa even though the money was there and this person had made an effort to show that their mother would follow the rules and return after 5 years. Canada was not happy with it. Next slide. So if you don't have the money to apply for either parent grandparent sponsorship or for a super visa, you can always just apply for a standard visa for your parents or grandparents, which allows for visits of up to 6 months at a time. But, they could come for 6 months, go back home, come back again in another 6 months if that works for them. And in special circumstances, you can sometimes apply for what's called a visitor record that allows your 6 month stay to be extended. But again, as I was just talking about with the super visa, it can be very hard for some people to get visitor visas. One of the brick walls I ran into was helping this woman who wanted her sisters from Iran to come visit her. And those sisters had everything going for them. They had good income, they had houses, they seemed very happy where they were. It that for whatever way they had overcome the gender restrictions in Iran and were doing very well for themselves. But immigration, we're clearly thinking women aren't happy in Iran. There have been these protests recently. Any woman coming to Iran, coming from Canada to Iran, must just want to make a refugee claim. So they just kept refusing her sisters no matter how well she did with their applications. So that's the downside with these. Next slide. And then if all else fails, so let's say, you don't have the money to do a parent-grandparent sponsorship, which again, also just isn't available and hasn't been for years. You don't have the money to do a super visa. You notice your visitor visas keep getting refused because the AI system has decided your family is suspicious. Um, there are sort of long shot attempts you can make that you might be able to get a lawyer to help you with. Again, if it's a private lawyer, you'd be paying a lot of money for something that's unlikely to succeed. And with legal aid lawyers, we have to assess whether we have the capacity to take long shot cases because, we get a lot of cases coming in and we don't want to take away time from cases that could succeed going into cases that are basically doomed from the start. So in immigration law, you can almost always attempt to make humanitarian and compassionate arguments and come up with a creative idea. You could, for example, try arguing, I've been sending so much money to my parents and they're so dependent on me that they're kind of metaphorically like my children. I'm kind of the metaphorical parent to my parent. So I'm going to make a humanitarian argument that I should be allowed to sponsor my parents the way people would normally be allowed to sponsor your children. That's something you could try. There's an important federal court ruling saying that is a reasonable argument for someone to make. However, 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, I don't know what the exact number is, but a lot of times an immigration officer would look at that and say, this is nonsense. This person is just trying to cheat the system, refused. So, you can try things out of desperation. And a lawyer, the unfortunate thing with us lawyers is it's very hard for us to say no. Our answer is always, it depends, maybe. But yeah, unfortunately, bringing over parents and grandparents is a very difficult prospect, especially with the parent and grandparent sponsorship system not having been reopened since 2020, and especially now with both the liberals and conservatives leaning in a sort of anti-immigration direction. I think that was all my slides. Yep. Thank you, Laura.
Okay, so that was a lot of information. So I know folks have been putting questions in the Q&A feature on Zoom and in the chat. And Allison's been a busy bee just answering questions in there. Thank you. Were there any new questions or outstanding questions that people would like to ask? Just trying to check them all. Okay, yes, I see hands up. Maybe that might be the best way to do this. If I can figure out how to get my Zoom working. Why isn't it showing? Oh, okay, so I'm going to allow you to talk. Is it Minaz?
Hi. Yes. I'm not sure how I can get my video on, but if it's not needed, then I'll leave it. I have been trying to get my mother sponsored under parent and grandparent for almost now 8, 9 years. Uh, my file did get select about 9 years ago when it was paper submission, and I was just 3 years old in Canada, 2.5 years old in Canada. So my first year income was a few $1,000s lower than required because I was just 6 months in the country. And for that reason, the file was rejected after a year and a half. I didn't appeal, or I didn't know if there was an option to appeal. Anyway, since then, file is my sponsorship or nothing is getting selected. I did apply in 2020 as a sponsor, but haven't received the invitation to apply. Now my problem is I can't even find my the confirmation number, the sponsorship number that I received. Is there a way to reach out to IRCC to find the number, the sponsorship number?
So, depending on where you live, that might be something your member of parliament could be able to help with. Unfortunately, so they all have aides who get to have special meetings with IRCC, and unfortunately, they all have very different interpretations of how much power they have, how many questions they're willing to ask. But I've certainly had cases where a client doesn't know everything that's going on with their file, but they live in an area with one of the more helpful MPs. They provide all the information they can about the file, and the MP is able to dig up what is or isn't there from IRCC. So it's hard to answer in the abstract, but that might be a way.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I'll try that route, see what help I can get. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand. I don't think there's anything new in the Q&A. Allison got right to them. Seeing as we are 5 minutes away from 8, so final call for any other questions, comments, feedback. Oh, okay, we got one. Here you go. Ask to unmute. All right, Parwin.
Hi, just want to ask regarding to your sponsorship. If a family refugee is here within 1 year and they have a dependent family in different countries, so can they sponsor the family which they are in different, even though they're not working, their sponsorship from the government?
So are you saying that they receive funds under the resettlement assistance program? Is that?
Yes.
Yes, they can still sponsor. That kind of assistance is not disqualifying.
Because there has been they're new to the country. They're not even been 1 year, but they left to a family member back. So
I mean,
that's what.
one thing to be aware of though is if they run out of that and then they have to go on social assistance for reasons other than disability, that would be disqualifying because they can't be on social assistance during any point in the application. Is there anything you want to add, Allison?
No, that's good because I just want to know if they can sponsor the rest of the family member.
Yeah, so I think the answer is that it's possible, but there could be complications. So just make sure they're going to their local clinic and actually ideally having someone go through the process with them because it could evolve over the course of an application.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Going once, twice. We're basically at time, and I don't see any other hands or comments or in the chat.
I just wanted to say something.
Sorry?
Because I just wanted to say something
Yeah.
that corrected something that like when there's something on the chart for the minimum necessary income. He reminded us that we also have to include not just your household and the number of applicants you're going to bring, but also the number of previous undertakings that are in effect. Those also have to be added in.
Thanks, Jen.
I also wanted to add, sorry, just in reference to the question about the lost confirmation number for the invitation or letter of interest for grandparents. There wasn't, when they reopened the program this year, they created a tool for you to search for your confirmation number if you didn't know it. If you couldn't remember it or had lost that email, that tool has seemed to have disappeared again, I guess, with the closing of the program. But if they open the program again next year, it might pop up again. So just to keep an eye on the IRCC website for parent-grandparent sponsorship, that might be an option.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Any other comments or questions from our panelists as well? I think we've covered everything. Okay, so thanks so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you to our panelists, our immigration law team here at Don Valley Legal, to Jen, Zach, and Allison. We will post the recording of this Zoom and the slides on our website this week, donvalleylegal.ca. For those of you if you've signed up for the Zoom, you'll have my email as well. If you need to follow up with us, you can reach out to me. If you do need legal assistance, though, please call our intake line. I'm going to put it in the chat, our website. And yes, please, if you do need to contact us, I'm going to put the phone number in the chat as well. Again, thanks so much for joining us tonight, and have a good evening. Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.